Happy Halloween, everyone, and welcome to the 17th episode of the In a Nutshell podcast, where Joe Mead and I, Sean Vowles, go over the Big Ten. This week, we're going to do a little bit of a jam-packed session here. We only have time for one. Week 9 recap, Week 10 preview, and then we're going to look at a couple of the scrimmages and exhibitions that the basketball teams have gone through. So, Joe, the first game of the day in the Big Ten for football last Saturday was Penn State and Indiana. Wasn't supposed to be close, but it took a 57-yard touchdown from Drew Allard and Lambert Smith with 1 minute and 46 seconds left for the Nittany Lions to take the lead. They ended up getting a safety later, which is their 9-point margin of victory. But, Joe, is this a little worrying for the Nittany Lions?
Yeah, I think it's definitely worrisome. I understand the noon game after a huge loss on the road. Furthermore, I understand that the crowd was not really into it. I mean, frankly, as a fan, I compared it to when Michigan lost to Michigan State in 2021. It's really hard to get fired up for that game unless you're probably in college doing other activities, which use your imagination, our listeners. But with that said, Penn State's defense, I don't think was as big a concern as their fans like to think. I think they let up a 90-yard fluke TD, and then their offense was just horrendous. They left the defense out there a lot. Drew Aller, I know he had the great pass at the end, but he threw a very dumb interception that got Indiana almost in the driver's seat to take the lead. They ended up kicking the field goal, which I was a big proponent against. But, I guess a positive for Indiana is Brendan Sorsby looked very good. 3 TDs, only threw 1 pick. I was not a big fan of their play calling. I understand they've had that shuffled around in the past month, but Penn State, they're at Maryland and then they play Michigan, and we'll get into Maryland later, but I don't think that's as conclusive a win for Penn State as maybe everyone might think. I understand Maryland's doing really bad right now, but Penn State's got a lot of problems. Drew Aller, 20-31 against a defense like Indiana is not great. And frankly, the running game wasn't as powerful as it should have been against Indiana's rushing defense, who's one of the worst in FBS. So, Sean, I think they have a lot to figure out. I think they have to come out on fire against Maryland to give their fans any confidence that they can actually upset Michigan on November 11th. But besides that, Sean, a lot to figure out in State College right now.
Yeah, they do have no room for error if they do want to make the college football playoff, and barely beating one of the worst teams in the conference is not a good start if you do want to run the table. The next game we'll go to, Joe, you mentioned them previously. Northwestern beating Maryland 33-27. This is the third straight loss for the Terrapins, and we talked about them being kind of the best of the rest in the Big Ten East, but things are going off the rails pretty quickly down there in College Park.
Sean, it's kind of amazing that Rutgers has a legitimate chance to finish 4th outright or 3rd outright if they really pull a miracle in the division. Maryland had a win this October. Think about that, Sean. They started 5-0. They competed with Ohio State for 3 quarters really well in Columbus. And they followed that up with a home loss to Illinois, who is just, no matter how you want to put it, terrible offensively. And then they followed up with a loss against Northwestern. Not that we called it last week, but we put them on high alert for that game. And the weird part of it, Sean, is Talia Tagovailoa. I understand he had the pick to seal it. I think he was just trying to make a play, and I don't fault him at all. It's just the poor discipline, the 6 penalties, 3 after the whistle, and the defense is just, there's no other way to put it, Sean. It's just been terrible. Brendan Sullivan, I want to give him some credit. He threw some really nice balls, but Brendan Sullivan should not be looking like a almost pro quarterback against any Big Ten defense. So, at this point, Maryland, they're clearly out of competing for the division, New Year's 6. Still a lot to play for. I do think they could play spoiler against Penn State or Michigan in their coming matchups against them. But the reason I'm putting Penn State on high alert against Maryland is simply because Maryland's now a team with nothing to lose, and they could score. Even in their losses, besides Illinois, they've shown great offensive ability. If they could clean up some of the dumb plays after the whistle and clean up some of the turnovers that they had, especially against the bigger games against Ohio State, I think they have a really legit chance to knock off Penn State. If Penn State's offense continues to dilly-dally, they'll be in a rude they will be in for a rude awakening on Saturday. And if they think they could skate by Maryland doing that, they definitely won't be able to skate by Michigan doing that. So I think that's one of the more important games you'll see in the conference. I actually think that's probably the most important game in the conference we'll have this week, but we'll preview that a little later.
Next game, Joe, includes the new leaders of the Big Ten West. That's the Minnesota Golden Gophers. They took care of Michigan State 27-12, and they hold a tiebreaker over three other teams at 3-2 in the Big Ten West. Minnesota seems to be taking advantage of their opportunities here, and they're putting themselves in the conversation to be in Indianapolis at the end of the year.
Don, I don't really know whether to be impressed by Minnesota or if it's just more of the same with Michigan State. I think Michigan State missed two prime opportunities. They ended up kicking two field goals on their first two drives. Really, Minnesota fumbled at the beginning of the game. Michigan State recovers. Michigan State has to score a touchdown there. You're a reeling 2-5 team. I thought they needed to be more aggressive. I understand Caden Hauser was only his third start, but my gosh, wasn't really a big fan of Michigan State's coaching decisions throughout this game. With all that said, Minnesota really needed a next man up in the backfield to step up after Darius Taylor was not present. So, having Jordan Newman, 40 carries for 204 yards, that's straight out of the 1970s, 80s Big Ten football, rushing for that amount, for that many carries. He certainly carried them to victory, both on his back. At the Calicanis, I think he had probably a pretty average game for him, 14-22, 200 yards, did throw a pick. But I guess the bigger story here for Minnesota is they need to get more versatility in offense. I think running the ball is great, but I think if they're going to finish this home stretch, especially with their next opponents, with the exception of Illinois, they'll probably be underdogs in two of their four last games. So with one of them being a definite loss, I don't see Minnesota going into the horseshoe and doing anything to Ohio State. So really good on them. Michigan State, I think one positive I just try to keep you guys watching, honestly, at this point is Sam Levitt, freshman quarterback, former Oregon commit, actually. He looked really good. Former Washington State commit from Oregon, sorry. He looked really good on that one drive. I don't know what's going to happen this next week, whether who's going to start or not. I'm sure we'll get into a little of that in our next preview.
Next game, Joe, not of a ton of consequence. Nebraska takes care of Purdue 31-14. If Nebraska's going to run the table like that fan that you ran into predicted, step one's complete. You can't run the table if you don't win the first game. So they are tied for the lead. They do find themselves in fourth, though, in the tiebreakers, but Nebraska keeping the dream alive another week.
Don, that guy, as maybe out of it as he was, I'll put that very politically correct. He might be onto something. Not that beating Purdue at home is some big milestone, but Nebraska just won an ugly game. They did not play well. Matt Rule was not happy after the game yet again. He even told the reporters, we went from discussing blowout losses to being angry after 3-score losses. Shows the progress they made. Certainly the opponents they had at the beginning of the year may have something to do with it. But Heinrich Harburg, he's developing as a quarterback simply not because he's making all these crazy plays. He's just not losing them the game. I think that's pretty much his job, a la maybe a Jake Rudock 2015 for Michigan, or maybe Sean Clifford most of his career at Penn State. You just don't want him to lose games. You want to take the plays where he can get them. The fact he has mobile ability is great. So, Purdue, I think at this point they're just waiting for the end of the season. Certainly a lot of evaluations going to be done. Certainly not going to be very critical of Ryan Walters in a rebuild at 2-6. They do go to the big house. Nebraska does play Michigan State, which we'll get into later. But Sean, let's get to this last game.
And the last one, Joe, the biggest game of the week was Ohio State going to Wisconsin. And they put on a very professional performance. They win the game 24-10. Their offense really didn't click at any times in this game, but their defense and the superstardom of Marvin Harrison got them across the line here. So Ohio State avoids the banana peel, and they go unbeaten another week.
Yeah, Sean, I don't know how to be positive. I think the game was very good. I'm going to criticize Wisconsin a little. When you're at the goal line down 10 to nothing at home in a night game, I think you have to go for the touchdown. They did take the points, which, didn't end up making a difference. The news that came out today is so alarming. Maya Williams out for the year. I understand they have never really established the run game this year, but the fact they've had Travion Henderson, he's been dealing with injuries most of his Buckeye career. Mayan's out for the year. Tradem and Hayden. Hayden's probably the only one without extensive injury history this season and throughout his career. That's going to be very concerning for Ohio State. I do admire their performance. Kyle McCord, I think he does not get enough credit. He doesn't just lose. He doesn't just not lose games. He does make some very good throws. He's certainly not a CJ Stroud, Justin Fields, but he puts it on the money. He lets his playmakers do their thing. Um, I think their offensive line is blocked a little better. I do think they're letting up a little too much pressure, but they have about 4 weeks to fix that before they play Michigan. And frankly, I do not see them being challenged very much.
And that's our Week 9 recap. And before we go to Week 10, just another reminder to check out jerseykings.com. There's a dash in between, jersey-kings.com, and use the code on the screen. 15% off some pretty cool jerseys. So, Joe, we'll start off the Week 10 preview with the team that you were just talking about, Ohio State, visits Rutgers. That's a noon kick on CBS, and Ohio State 18.5-point favorites as of recording. Any reason why this should be a close game?
John, I'd be pretty surprised if this wasn't a close game. Um I'd be surprised if this was a close game. I misspoke. I'd be even more surprised if at least 40% of the crowd isn't Ohio State fans. I do think they will travel well. Maybe it's hard to tell with all the red scarlet mixed in with, Rutgers scarlet. With all that said, Sean, this is Rutgers off the bye. Schiano, Ryan Day does give a lot of credit to Greg Schiano for helping start his head coaching career while Urban Meyer was suspended. Greg really helped out Ryan Day. Some on this podcast may say he helped Ryan Day report Michigan, but we'll save that for the end. Sean, I think Rutgers at 6-2 just has to approach this game as what it is, house money. They've exceeded a lot of people's expectations. This is probably their hardest. This is definitely their hardest game left on the schedule. I don't see the trip to Happy Valley being easy, but certainly not as challenging as playing one of the best players in college football, if not the best, in Marvin Harrison Jr. So I think Ohio State cruises. I think you see more of the same. Maybe their fans will freak out if their offensive line or their tackles let up another sack, but I don't see Rutgers being able to do anything offensively against this Buckeye defense to even make this a game.
Yeah, Rutgers already 6 wins, already going bowling. I don't think any pressure's really on them there, and some weird things happen when that's the case. But the next two, Joe, we'll pair them together just because nobody's really going to be watching them because they're also at noon. It's Wisconsin at Indiana and Nebraska at Michigan State. The two away teams are tied at the top of the Big Ten West, and if you want to see yourself at the top of the table at the end of the year, you've got to take care of business in these.
Yeah, Wisconsin, I understand Braylon Allen has an ankle sprain. I do not know his status as of Tuesday. I do think Wisconsin will handle Indiana. I think the only way, especially with the defense Wisconsin has and the lack of offensive consistency Indiana has, there's no way Wisconsin loses this game unless they turn the ball over, which I think Joe Longo, the offensive coordinator, and Luke Fickell will not allow that to happen because they're pretty aware they have the sizable talent advantage. And if Wisconsin has a lead in this game, I never see them surrendering it because of their style of play, especially the style of play they're going to have to play with Braden Locke. Nebraska, Michigan State, that's a more interesting game. Nebraska is only favored by 3. Michigan State, I do not know what they're going to do at quarterback. I certainly doubt they'll trot Noah Kim out there. Kane Hauser, I don't think the book's closed on him at all. He made his 3rd career start. I think he showed some flashes, as has Sam Levitt in, frankly, mop-up duty at the end. Whether it's Levitt or Hauser, the key to that game, Sean, for Michigan State is kind of what I've been telling Maryland. Just don't shoot yourself in the foot. I do think they're in a really large disadvantage coaching-wise because Harlan Barnett's certainly trying his best, but he's just not the in-game manager most head coaches are. So, Sean, I think that could be a really, really close game. The way Michigan State's going to win on defense is they have to just make Heinrich Haarberg do what he's done in the past, make really bad decisions, give Michigan State a shorter field. One bright spot for Michigan State's been their kicker, Jonathan Kim, not to be confused with Noah Kim. But all that said, Sean, I don't see Michigan State winning another game on their schedule besides maybe Indiana. So this is their senior day because they wrap up at Ford Field. I do think this is probably a must-win game for them, simply to just get one more win in front of their fans.
It, it might sound a little oversimplified, but if you're the home teams in these games, Indiana, Michigan State, give your crowd something to root for. There's nothing worse than being down a couple scores after the end of the first quarter, and then it's as if you're not at home at all. Those Wisconsin's -9.5 and Nebraska -3, so those games certainly are expected to be a little bit closer, but those away teams, they have a title in they have a title in the plans, and you can't lose these games. Next game, Joe, we go to the 3:30 slate. Number 9, Penn State goes to Maryland. This game will be on Fox. Penn State 10-point favorites. Maryland off a 3-game losing streak, and Penn State off of a very unimpressive win. Both teams coming in not so great. What's going to happen here?
Don, I am shocked the Lions -10 for Penn State. I understand the records are what they are, and Maryland's lost to the teams they've lost to. But if Maryland scores in this game and Penn State somehow gets in a 2-score deficit, I easily see Maryland winning this game. I think Maryland has the capability now to say they have one game in them a year, Sean, whether that's been 2018 Ohio State, really 2 games last year, 2022 Michigan and 2022 Ohio State. Both those games pretty much went to the wire besides the Michigan one in the fourth quarter. They have one in these a year, Sean, where they just go crazy offensively and really put pressure on the other offense to score every possession. I think Penn State certainly doesn't have the capability to do so like they have in the past. If Sean Clifford was the quarterback, I'll put it very clearly, I would like Penn State's chances a lot better simply because Aller, he's shown great ability to air the ball deep. I understand he's not gotten a lot of opportunity to do so. Maryland might take advantage of that. Maybe they bait him deep toward the beginning of the game and they intercept a pass or they get enough pressure on him. I think this could be the game of the week. If Penn State does, whoever gets out to a 2-score lead, I'll put it this way, is guaranteed a victory. I do think can be back and forth, and it probably will be. But Sean, I'm just going to go out on record and say it. I do think Maryland has a significant chance to upset Penn State. Won't say they will, just significant chance.
Yeah, I mean Maryland, they haven't been playing great recently, but that Ohio State game, they came ready to play, and in those games, if you're the underdog, you've got to start off the game well to have a chance. You get blown out, you're down 21-0 in the second quarter. Yeah, that's curtains. But you come ready to play, and then oftentimes the quality does shine in the second half. But Maryland did not have a problem coming ready to play against Ohio State, so no reason that they shouldn't be ready here either, especially in front of their home fans. Next 3:30 game, Joe, Illinois at Minnesota on the Big Ten Network. Minnesota just -2. They're coming off of a 2 nice road wins in a row over Iowa and Michigan State. Why is this line so low?
I'm pretty surprised as to why it's so low. Simply, it might be that Minnesota's offense is so, again, like all Big Ten West teams, except maybe Wisconsin, it's just been so inconsistent. I do think Brett Bielema is still Brett Bielema. He'll have plenty of game plans to stifle Minnesota's rushing attack, which if you stifle that, you're going to make Calic Manis beat you, which he's rarely done. So I do think Minnesota takes care of business. I don't see Illinois or Altmaier being able to do too much. That they haven't shown me anything this whole year besides the game at Maryland, who admittedly has a terrible defense. So I do think Minnesota wins, but close. Maybe closer, maybe more than 2. Maybe they win by 10. But I guess we could go to the Iowa Northwestern game. It's kind of a similar theme. I believe the over-under as of now is at 29.5, which is Big Ten West football. There's no other way to put it. I think we got to sell T-shirts that say Big Ten West football under 30. I can't wait to tell our kids about what Big Ten West football was all about when it's all said and done. But Iowa -5. I don't love that line as much as other people do. Brian Ferentz, big news of the week that he won't be back next year. Either way, it doesn't have too much relevance towards this game. Northwestern's really overperformed their expectations, over 4 wins. I mean, 4 wins right now. It seems like they may play with nothing to lose, and Iowa is still in the midst of a division title race. So I do like Northwestern to upset Iowa more so than Maryland to upset Penn State. So I'll go with the Wildcats here, Sean.
Yeah, it's Iowa. It's going to come down to whether they can get a defensive or special teams touchdown, and that's not that's not supposed to happen. So, if you're the kicker, if you're the kick returner on Iowa, don't move your arms, and Iowa is a better team than Northwestern, but they have been way more dysfunctional offensively than even the most pessimistic of fans could have imagined, and they still have a chance. So that game is on Peacock at 3:30, and Iowa certainly needs that for a chance at the Big Ten West because they do not have the tiebreaker against Minnesota, so they're going to have a better record than the Golden Gophers come the end of the year to win. Last game, Joe, Big Ten Saturday night on NBC, 7:30. It's your Michigan Wolverines hosting Purdue, 32.5-point favorites. Just don't get hurt.
Yeah, that's the message. Blake Corum, hopefully under 10 or 11 carries. Edwards, very limited touches. JJ, if he runs the option, fire everyone who even has a hand in calling plays, including Jim Harbaugh. I guess the story on Michigan is not whether they win this game or whether it's even close. It's probably what's happened off the field. So I'll address two things that I'm very confident in saying. With all the noise going on around the program, I'm hearing Jim Harbaugh and the administration are very close to a contract extension. I think Pete Thamel, the ESPN journalist, is probably yelling at the sky right now as this happens. But, regardless, Jim Harbaugh is still going to be one of the highest paid coaches in college football when all is said and done. I think Michigan is really ready, maybe not to go to war with the NCAA, but show their nice finger, for lack of a better term, toward the NCAA and extend Jim Harbaugh, which frankly is overdue as a Michigan fan, and most reasonable observers of the sport would agree.
So that'll wrap up Week 10, and we will be back early next week to recap those games and talk about anything interesting that happens. Joe, we're just over 20 minutes. So we got 10 or so minutes for basketball here, and then if we maybe a couple questions. Really, the only thing that people are talking about in the Big Ten now is some of these scrimmages or exhibitions. Every team is doing them. Some are secret, which means no fans, which basically just means your future opponents can't get any film on you. And then some of these charity scrimmages are televised. And there's some high-quality games. Indiana beat UND 74-53. Mbako and Ware impressed for Indiana fans. They have another one against Marion on Friday. But there were 3 top 25 games, which included Big Ten teams, Joe. And I don't remember a time that's happened. And these games don't even count. But, the minutes that these players were playing and the atmospheres that they had at the stadium, if nobody told you, it would be pretty easy to mistake them for a regular season game. We'll start in Arkansas. Purdue went down to play the preseason favorites in the SEC, the Razorbacks, and the Hogs won 81-77 at Bud Walton Arena. Arkansas is a really talented team. Lawyer and Edey, 15 points each. I don't really think there's much to note here from Purdue. A lot of their starters were down in the 20s in minutes, so you played a really good team, you battled with them, and unfortunately I think you just came off on the wrong end.
Yeah, not much to say there. I think we could take a lot less from that than maybe some of these other scrimmages. And winning at Arkansas in a real or fake game is not easy. And I think Purdue, hopefully it taught them something, like maybe how to win against some of these non-conference teams come later in the season. That wasn't a shot. That was a legitimate observation. But Sean, let's go to the next scrimmage.
Next one is going to be at the Breslin Center. Tennessee knocked off Michigan State 89-88. This was a top 10 game, though. The Volunteers are ranked number 9, and the Michigan State Spartans ranked number 4. The Volunteers got off to a huge lead early on, and then obviously held on to win by 1. If I'm Michigan State, I wouldn't worry too much other than Tennessee's two best guards, Santiago Vescovi and Zakai Ziegler, did not play. So obviously you want to win this game at home, but I don't think there's any shame in losing to a top 10 team, especially in a game that doesn't matter.
Not at all, Sean. I think Michigan State spotted. They were down 17-1 early. The fact they came back, Tyson Walker and Malik Hall did miss some critical layups, not even criticizing them. They're still in preseason form. The fact they started off that bad and still should have won the game, maybe the call at the end wasn't the greatest. I'll put it this way. If that was the regular season, the foul that gave Tennessee the go-ahead free throws would not have been called in the regular season, not even because of Izzo. Referees will not whistle that play on the road, especially when you have thousands of his own members screaming in your ear. That will not happen. So, again, nothing too major for Michigan State. I do think their minute distribution was pretty interesting. They gave the freshmen a lot of go. I doubt that's going to be the case come the season or the Champions Classic when they play Duke. But consensus for most Michigan State fans and writers who follow the team closely is not of huge concern. Certainly a learning experience.
And the last one, Joe, 25th ranked Illinois beat Kansas, who was ranked number 1, 82-75 at the State Farm Center in Illinois. Hunter Dickinson is still winless against Illinois in his college career. Terrence Shannon had 28 points for the Fighting Illini, and Kevin McCullough led the way with 25 for the Jayhawks. But Joe, if Illinois fans are probably kicking themselves that this game doesn't count because they really showed that they are not the team that we saw in February and March last year.
Yeah, Sean, the last scrimmage we'll preview is on a similar note. But with that said, just hopefully this just gives them confidence that they could really compete. I do think it's terrible that you have such a great atmosphere like that and it doesn't count. That's why I'm not a huge fan of these scrimmages overall. I'm not going to insert too much of my opinion into it, but it gives Illinois some confidence, and Hunter, new squad, new team, new setting, still can't beat the Illini.
And the last one, Joe, which was a secret scrimmage, I believe, had your Michigan Wolverines, so why don't you take it away?
Sean, this is probably one of the weirder scrimmage scores I've ever seen, 115-111. The even weirder part, and I'm going to smack myself if I say that one more time, is they played 4 12-minute quarters, so NBA time. That part is not what brings it home for me. It's the fact that Michigan put up 115 points even with 8 extra minutes. This team has been selling itself. Writers have been selling that they will be a defensive team. And a lot of that is probably based on the fact they have a lot of great defensive players. But the other part of it, too, is that offensively they're projected to struggle. But this was the most secret scrimmage of all because no one has a box score. No one has whether Marquette starters played a lot or Michigan starters played a lot. So I guess one positive is Michigan may be able to score this year. Certainly not going to put it to that crazy expectation. And one worry is letting up 111 points. I understand Marquette's a top 15, 10 team to most people. Maybe they still need to communicate on defense. Jawan probably won't be back till December. I've heard that from a lot of Michigan journalists and inside information in the program. So Phil Martelli, who led the team throughout late February and March of 22, did a great job, went 3-2, won 2 games when they were the underdog too. Is going to be coaching the team. I really couldn't have a better associate head coach than that. Someone who's been on the bench for 20 years as a head coach in his career. And Phil versus Rick, November 13th. If you went to Catholic school in New Jersey, just love good college basketball. Seeing them handshake, oh boy, that's a great moment.
Yeah, so Joe, we can talk a little bit about how much these mean, especially the games that you can't watch and you just see a box score. Sometimes you see the minutes, but I honestly think that people take the box scores way too seriously. And, coaches often have these agreements in place before these scrimmages? Like, hey, can you press us? Can you play some zone? Can if can you play your big guy when my big guy's in there, and we'll give him rests at the same time? So like, if nobody was there, you don't know any of these things that happened. So I really don't. And if somebody has even the slightest of injuries, they are not playing in these, and that's why you see a lot of even full starting lineups of teams not even playing in these scrimmages. So obviously you want to win them, and if you do beat a really good team and it's on TV or Big Ten Plus or something like that, and you can watch it and you can see who's playing for the other team, I don't think there's a whole lot. There's a reason why these are secret, and it doesn't count at the end of the day. Obviously you want to. Everybody starts 0-0 next Monday or Tuesday or whatever their first game is. But tell me a little bit about what you think of the scrimmages in general.
I've never been the biggest fan of televising them because I think they could give you a false sense of reality. And maybe just viewing the score does so too. I don't know too many Michigan fans, and I'm not just doing this selfishly, it's just because they're the most prominent example, turning around and claiming that their team is going to have a crazy set of expectations compared to what preseasons were. I don't know, Sean. I think it's good just to get normal competition in. I kind of compare it to those European friendlies that they do, like the USA tour when they go to maybe Saudi Arabia or Asia. Maybe more so for fanfare. So if you're gonna do that, maybe have a little more fanfare involved. But no, I think it's one of the minor components of our game and maybe made more major as we're hungry to get the season tipped off.
Yeah, it's just if you're a big fan of a team or just in general, it's good to see the new players in your program. But other than that, that's really it. I mean, there is still a week to go in the season. You can work on stuff in a week. You can figure out a new set of plays or a defense in a week. So I don't think that, I'm sure, especially the televised ones, that the coaches were not emptying the playbook, especially on offense, because you can watch those games and, they raise money for charity, most of them, which is great. But I think there's a lot more to lose in these than win. You get everybody some playing time, and that is not the case early on in the season, but it's stuff to talk about, and especially some of these odd results, which you do see up and down the country. St. John's did lose to Division II Pace. Four of their starters were out, and then Louisville, who is going to unfortunately be the laughing stock of college basketball again, did lose to Division II Kentucky Wesleyan. So everybody's 0-0, whether you beat Kansas by 14 or you lose to a Division III team. So that's all the scrimmages that we have. I'm sure there were other ones, but until the games become official, it has nothing to do with anything really, other than making sure you get some minutes in the legs of your players and you avoid some injuries. But Joe, just over 30 minutes, so got some time for a question or two if there are any.
Yeah, I'll delay some of these as we're doing this live. So most of you are going to listen on Spotify or rewatch some of these clips. The college football playoff ranking show is currently ongoing. It's 7:06 Eastern time on October 31st. Maybe some of our viewers are also trick-or-treating, so hope you had a good time. All that said, Sean, the first question, and really there's like five questions directed straight at me for the Michigan scandal. What in all likelihood happens to Michigan? That question just pretty much sums up all five. So I'll give you my opinion. Let's just be realistic. If you're going to believe the conspiracy theory that the NCAA is out to get Harbaugh, I'm not going to dispute nor agree with it, I'd say. But if you're a believer that an equally good theory is that NBC, Fox, ESPN does not want Michigan excluded from big games or from games where there's not postseason implications, which would happen if they were given a postseason ban, not even for this year, but for the years going forward. So I do think they'll make a example out of Connor Stalions, the alleged spy. I do think the Central Michigan State photos are kind of funny. Kind of gives me Bobby Valentine vibes when he had like the fake mustache on. All that said, Sean, I think he's given a heavy show clause. Michigan will be fined a lot of money. They certainly will be on probation. Maybe they'll have one of those kind of recruits for 3 weeks or whatever. But I after the Oklahoma State postseason ban in basketball and what Tennessee not got away with, but got slapped on the wrist for, I do not think they're going to. It would be in their best interest to make an example out of Michigan, especially as the NCAA loses all credibility among the public. So
Yeah, and people love to hate Michigan, but people love to hate the NCAA more, I think. And there will not be an in-season, post-season ban. Like that, there's no precedence for that ever, and that would really do a lot worse. I think that would rub a lot of people the wrong way to do that a half or 2/3 of the way through the season. So we could see something at the start of next year, maybe a 3 or 4 game suspension for Harbaugh, and Michigan will schedule East Carolina for those games. And I really don't think that this is some groundbreaking Astros type level scandal, because they are not really doing anything that would make that big of an advantage, I don't think, especially because teams change signs, just like baseball teams change signs and stuff like that. But it is against the rules, so, or allegedly what's happened is against the rules, so we just have to see.
yeah, Sean, maybe we'll stay on maybe for like 2 or 3 more minutes when all the rankings come out. We're currently at the top 10. Sean, this one's directly for both of us. I'm going to start with you. Sean, of the teams you've previewed, which team that's currently in the NCAA tournament do you see not making the NCAA tournament? So maybe a team that's projected preseason to be in most brackets and that's not going to be. That's a tough one. Good one, though.
Yeah, I haven't done a bracketology yet. There isn't really any reason to, because you only have a couple analytics out, and no wins or bad losses, and those are, kind of half the resume when you think of it. But there's probably 3 teams you can point to in each of these conferences that are going to be on the cusp. I would think Iowa is probably not going to make the tournament from the Big Ten of the 3 that we identified last week, Joe, that are going to be around the bubble. It's about time that their style of play doesn't work, don't you think? Like, it's annoying to play against. It's annoying to watch. We don't think they have the players to make it, but their hopes is that they're going to hear their name called.
You talking Iowa?
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, I'm sorry, Iowa fans. I really like you guys. I think your fan base is one of the nicer in all of college sports. With all that said, the the basketball and football team I compare because they refuse to get with. I don't think by choice. It's just what we see on the field or court. They refuse to get with what's going on in the conference. In the Big Ten, every team that's won the Big Ten in the past like 7 years is a great offense and modern offense, and Iowa refuses to do that in football. And then in basketball, let's think of every great Big Ten team, Sean, that's gone far in the tournament the past couple of years. I understand Michigan State didn't go too far, Sweet 16, but they played great defense down the stretch. 2022, 2021, Michigan won the conference, played phenomenal defense, and then you had those Michigan State teams. Michigan State's known for defense. So seeing teams like that do really well in March and Iowa not being able to, maybe hire Luke Yaklich, Michigan assistant coach from 2017 to 2019, hiring a guy like that or a Billy Donovan, maybe an ex-head coach or ex-high school guy who just does defense. Like that's all they see, all they worry about, defensive coordinator, for lack of a better term. I'm shocked they haven't done that because they're really a defensive way, not from being maybe a national power, but from maybe being a second weekend team, which a lot of Big Ten teams like Illinois and Iowa, they're all having trouble doing that. So, Sean, I think we both agree on Iowa.
I thought I was low on them, but you've got them a couple pegs lower, and there's a way
I
that
think,
there's a way that they could really be bad this year, but they could also score it like nobody else and be a 7 seed and prove us wrong.
yeah, Sean, there's no other way to put it. One of these teams, I think it was kind of Rutgers last year, and maybe it'll be them this year. One of Rutgers or Iowa is going to fall flat on their face. Not as a program, just maybe this year. Every coach is going to have a down year. I think both McCaffrey and Pike will do very good jobs at their schools. So not referendum on their tenure, just more of a referendum on, time to change, guys. As of now, Sean, Penn State was just revealed to be the 11th team in the CFP rankings. We're currently at number 7. A lot of people on Twitter have some very colorful disagreements about most of the rankings. So I'm sure we'll get into a little of that next week. Right now, we are doing just one cast. Sean, maybe we end with one more basketball question before all the rankings are released. And this one is a really good one. Do you think that there's a significant advantage to playing on Thursday of the Big Ten tournament? I don't know what the advantage would be, but Sean, maybe you could comment, maybe more so
If
for
you're
the
a bubble
tournament.
team and you need another win, maybe. But as a Indiana fan and us not really having our lives on the line in the Big Ten tournament last year, you really don't want to play. Like, winning the thing is great, but you really don't want to play more games unless you have to. So, if you're on the bubble, yes, but as a fan of a team that didn't have to worry about the Big Ten tournament last year, I found it pretty, uninteresting, and I happened to watch a lot of the other conference tournaments because I felt like they were a little more was on the line.
Yeah, Sean. John Beeline did have the famous quote, and this is John Beeline, probably the guy who gives the least amount of quotes to the media. He said, it's a thing of two extremes. You either want to lose the first game or win it all. You don't want to maybe win Thursday, Friday, and lose Saturday if you're one of these teams that's already been been selected to the tournament. And I'll say, Sean, I'll be honest, I don't think a lot of teams have made a significant seed jump or even winning the tournament unless they were on the bubble. An example is Michigan in 2017. They won the Big Ten tournament, and
It's
they
an eight
probably could have been
seed,
a
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
as an 8th seed in the Big Ten tournament. Probably could have jumped from 8-9, which is what they were slated going in for the NCAA tournament. Could have jumped to a 5 seed, maybe even probably a 6. They only jumped to a 7. Ended up having to play Patino and Louisville in the second round. They did end up winning. Point being, Sean, I uh, I think the conference tournament's great. I think it's really entertaining, kind of a sneak peek of everything. But Sean, reason I had that weird reaction is Ohio State, breaking news, the number 1 team in the country in college football. Georgia number 2, Michigan number 3, and Florida State number 4. I guess my instant reaction, we'll hear yours in a second. Ohio State, I'm going to agree with them being number 1. Certainly, the eye test might not indicate that to some people. They do have the best resume. They won at a top 15 team at Notre Dame. They did beat Penn State, who's just outside the top 10 as of now. And one thing that's shocking is if you're going to go with that, I think you have to put Michigan 4 because Florida State has one of the more impressive wins all year, which was blowing out LSU week 1 at a neutral site. Sean, what are your thoughts?
You knew they had something up their sleeve, right? There is really no reason to do this now other than to get people talking about it. So I certainly think the top 3 is pretty set between the Ohio State and Michigan and Georgia, and then Florida State I think is pretty solidly 4th. And there's some fans of Florida State that are worried that they might not get in the playoff if they do win the rest of the games. Obviously, Oklahoma's loss did help with that, but the Pac-12 doesn't have a team in the top 4. Where's the highest? Is Washington 5th, Joe?
Washington is
Yeah.
5th. I'm going to read it off for our viewers. Certainly, a lot of you are going to be listening after the fact, so maybe you can skip 15 seconds. Ohio State's 1, Georgia's 2, Michigan's 3, Florida State's 4, Washington is 5, getting the other top 10 as we speak. Texas was at 7. Here it is. 6 was Oregon. So Washington, who beat number 6 Oregon, is only 5th. They've had better wins than Michigan and frankly Georgia. So Washington fans being outraged, I do understand. 7 Texas, 8 Alabama, 9 Oklahoma, 10 Ole Miss. I don't agree with. I mean, I do agree with most of it. The only other disagreement I'd have is Oklahoma did beat Texas. They do each have 1 loss. Texas does have one of the better wins at Alabama. But Sean, if Oklahoma beats Texas head to head, I understand this will get resolved later on. They should be above them. So
Yeah, it seems to me that there are 5 teams that have a really good chance to make the playoff right now. And if Washington and Florida State do find their way at the end of the season undefeated as their conference's champions, it will be tough. But the loser of Ohio State Michigan might have to worry a little bit because
absolutely.
the Big 12 will not have somebody in the playoff unless there's a, two of the three. Washington loses, Florida State loses, and Michigan or Ohio State lose, which maybe a Big 12 champion sneaks in. But if you're Michigan and Ohio State, I still think you're pretty comfortable if you do end up with one loss at the end of the year, and then the other would presumably have 0. But you just knew they had something up their sleeve, and I wouldn't say super unexpected, but a little bit surprising considering the AP voters have had Ohio State behind Michigan and Georgia for the entire year. But it's a completely different set of people, and month and change or so away from seeing the actual 4, right?
Yeah, Sean, I think one thing I'll wrap up with is if these rankings stay the same, which I'm led to believe they can, I don't see Ohio State nor Georgia or Michigan. Vegas certainly doesn't losing before the last week of the regular season. I don't understand how you could drop number one Ohio State, who might lose, let's say they lose a 3-point game to Michigan on the road. I don't know how the heck you drop them out of the top four. That's going to be a really interesting thing to see. And then vice versa. If Ohio State, the number one team in the country, kicks a walk-off field goal against Michigan, how the heck do you drop them from 3 to 6? It just doesn't make much sense. But it'll all get solved. We're going to play the game, so we can play mental gymnastics throughout the week. I'm sure we'll be getting plenty of questions. But Sean, let's wrap it. Let's wrap it up.
Yep. Thank you for tuning in a little longer today. We did want to see what happened there, and it had a very big impact on a couple of our Big Ten teams. So thanks for tuning in. And we will see you next week where we will recap the football games and talk about